Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is episode 2 of the Full Scale Podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Twatwa, and I'm joined by my co host, Timothy Mukiti. Hi, Timothy. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's a good day. We're refreshed. We have a refreshed look, as you can see, courtesy of Mukiti Advocates, LLP.
Pleasure is all mine.
Thank you very much for hosting us today, your lovely office. So today, part 2, another introductory episode. Part 1, we sort of talked about who we are, why we're doing this, what we're about. So now we're getting into the substance of the podcast, I think. And first topic of the day is startups. I think this is going to be a huge part of what we talk about throughout the series, certainly this season.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be helpful for us to start out by understanding what is a startup, right? I think it's a term that's used quite often. You hear people talk about startups in very many different contexts. So I thought let's first define what a startup is, so we know what we're all talking about. We're all reading from the same script. And Tim, I think maybe you can kick us off by helping us understand what is a startup, what defines a startup. Is every business that's a new business a startup, or are there nuances to that?
Yeah.
And is every entrepreneur a founder of a startup? So help us navigate that and walk through what that means.
Wonderful. Thank you. The term startup is actually a term that is especially being used a lot by a lot of people who found a business. You find you meet a lot of people and they say, I'm running a startup. But sometimes it's not a term that is very well understood because it is a technical term. It's not a term that you can use loosely. It's like a term like company. When you say I can say I'm in your company here. We are accompanying each other in this podcast. But it's different when I say I am running a company, because the term company is a technical term that has meaning to it, and it describes a particular entity. It's the same way with the term startup. Now, I think we can even start by tracing the history. And the Oxford Dictionary traces the first usage of the term startup to make reference to a business structure to 1976. In an article in Forbes, when they were discussing about the concept of investing in startups. Since then, it has evolved. Of course, gotten more meaning and gotten a little more grounded in what it means. And at the present, actually, and I still refer to Forbes again. Actually, Forbes defines a startup, and I think it's an apt definition we can use to understand a startup. It defines it, and I'm paraphrasing, as a business that has a groundbreaking idea that desires to change the world and is scalable. Okay, it can be scaled to grow significantly, and has a sort of novelty. And another fact about it is ability for it to return significant, make significant returns for investors or the founders.
Okay.
So from that definition, we can pick a couple of things on what exactly would be a startup. What exactly is a startup? And number one about a startup, it has to have a novel idea. And has the second thing, and when you say a novel idea, for example, and I can use an example of Uber and taxi. So Uber is a startup, but the idea of using other people's vehicles to be ferried to work or to other places was there for a long time. But Uber was a startup in the sense that the concept that they came up with was new. Yeah. It was novel. It wasn't there before, where somebody can use their own car to take people to work or to take people to destinations. Again, it had the potential of being scaled up. That's a second element about a startup. Where it's the ability for it to be scaled. And when we mentioned scale, I think in our last episode we explained what we touched a bit on scaling.
Correct.
And scaling is basically growing in multiple ways. Growing significantly. You can expand, reach different markets, new markets, and grow big. Yeah. And then the other element of it is of course ability to make significant returns. That's why people do invest in startups.
Yeah.
Because there is possibility that if you make investments at the early stages of a startup, then as a startup grows, then your investment grows with it. So those are the three crucial elements. One of them is the novelty of idea, trying to solve something that hasn't been solved before, or solving it differently. And then the second one is ability for it to scale, to be able to grow big significantly. And the third one, of course, is ability to bring significant returns. Okay, that makes a startup.
Gotcha.
Now, you had mentioned something about founders, and I think it's good for us to even explain the concept of founders, because in fact, before we even explain founders, I think we can try to distinguish the difference between a startup and any entrepreneurial venture. So if, for example, I start a barbershop, it may not necessarily be a startup unless there's something novel about how I am
you're
cutting hair. Or basically, and I can replicate that concept, I can grow it, I can scale it multiple times, and it can bring investment. Same way, if, for example, I start up a gym, it's not a startup. If I'm just bringing equipment and people are subscribing and they're coming to the gym to exercise. But if I come up with a fitness app, that solves us a unique issue around the fitness cycle, and which we can, that can grow to multiple continents. People start using it. It's groundbreaking. It's very useful. Then that's a startup. Yeah. So not every a startup is an entrepreneurial venture, yes.
Okay.
But not every entrepreneurial venture is a startup.
Okay.
The idea has to be novel. And the appetite for investors, in the startup ecosystem is the fact that you can scale this particular idea that you're starting with significantly, and then you can equally make a lot of money out of it. Now, on the question of founders, a founder, of course, is a person who establishes the startup. And because it's also a technical term, it's not just limited to the person who starts the startup. It also applies to people who join the startup at the early stages before you have, and we will discuss the minimum viable product, MVP. We'll discuss it a little later in the podcast. Before you have fully tested the new idea, tested it in the market. If you're joining a startup at that stage, you may be considered a founder or a co-founder, So a person may come up with an idea. Because, for example, like I come an idea with an idea that is about fitness. We need to make an app that helps people with their fitness journey. But I may not be good. I may be good at understanding what I hope to achieve, but I cannot design. So I invite somebody to join me to help me design the product.
Someone with the technical
expertise, exactly. I may be able to have an idea, and this person may have technical expertise, but I cannot understand anything about financing. I am not good at finding money. I'm not good at financing, because you need a lot of financing for startups. We may invite a guy who is good at either fundraising or even sort of helping us with the financing work. And they will be still considered a founder if they're joining at the early stages before we have, done a couple of steps in the startup journey.
I think that's a very good breakdown. And I think the points you've flagged, especially around novelty, scalability, I think those are sort of some of the key things that people need to really be on watch for. Like, if you are coming up with a startup, how are you different, right? If you're, as you mentioned, starting a barbershop, that it doesn't really count as a startup. I just wanted to pick on that really and expound on also the concept of a moat, right?
Actually, yes.
Because that's something that we hear a lot about. Someone says, "Oh, what's your moat?" Right? When you pitch, a lot of the times people pitch for funding, and they're asked, "What is the moat for your startup?" So I wanted to sort of expand on that. Another definition, a word that we'll be using quite a bit on this podcast. So, concept of a moat comes from medieval castles, right? So you have your castle. You set it up, your family, your knights, your noblemen, whoever, they're all within the castle.
Yes.
And your castle is protected by a moat, which is just like a body of water that you've dug around the castle. It's sort of entrenched. And then the only way in and out of the castle is the drawbridge, which you can lift when everyone's in, or you can put it down to allow people in. So you can say, "Halt, who goes there?" And say, then if you allow them in, then you draw.
Sounds like Game of Thrones.
So precisely, that's sort of, I think, the image I'm hoping people get in their minds. So when you lift the drawbridge, people can't access the castle anymore. The castle is fortified. You can't really lay siege to the castle. It's very difficult for you to get in the castle. That's sort of the concept of a moat when it comes to a startup. So as a startup, so you've come up with this brand new idea. It's really novel and it's scalable, and you're talking to investors and you're getting funding, and now you've hit the road. You have traction. You're growing the company. What's to stop someone else out there from going and doing exactly what you're doing
Exactly.
and replicating exactly what you're doing one to one and eating your lunch, so to speak, right? So that's the concept of a moat. How are you how is your position defensible? What sets you apart? And I think it goes to the heart of the novelty of your idea. That, at least that's one way that you can sort of have a strong moat. A good example, I think, is Google.
Yeah.
I think Google is probably the best example in that if you look at Google search is something that's so tough to remove as the preeminent search engine, right?
Yeah.
And people have tried
a lot.
You mentioned like Bing and
yeah.
all these other. Yahoo, I think, also had their own search engine.
Mozilla even tried. Yeah.
Exactly. So the issue is Google's been around for a while. They have a superior algorithm that knows how to sort of find different websites and different things online. There are network effects in that many people are already using Google, so it already understands. It'll say, okay, what did other people look for? And it say, is this what you're looking for? Before you even know what you're looking for, it's already auto-filled it for you based on what it's seen other people look for. So the sheer number of people on there, the technology, the brand of Google, the fact that that's where everyone goes to first.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we talked about AI coming in and potentially disrupting that space. But most of the time, that's where you go for your search first. So that is such a huge moat for Google that anyone who's coming in to try and create something similar, it's very tough to unseat Google from that position.
Because they're playing catch up.
Exactly.
And even if you're catching up, they're a couple of miles ahead. So if you catch up to where they are now, by the time you catch up, they're probably a couple of miles ahead, which makes it difficult. Yeah,
that's another key part of the startup journey, right?
Yeah.
Is you need to keep innovating.
Exactly.
Because people are always going to be chasing after you. They see the thing you're building and they're like, wow, we could do that too. So you need to keep defending your position and making sure that you're innovating and going even farther than where they are. So that by the time they catch up to you, you're already way ahead. So that's, I think, something that folks need to keep in mind as you're coming up with your ideas for startups, as you're venturing into this world. Think about what sets you apart. How novel is your idea? Is it scalable? Is it sort of all the things that we've talked about, but making sure that you have that novelty and you can also back that up by having a strong moat.
Yeah.
I think that's really key.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe you can add on that. You can just let us know a little bit more about, the life cycle of,
sure.
A startup. What is the life cycle of a startup? How does it look like?
Yeah. That's a really good one. Let me use the example of the fitness app that we talked about, right? So say Tim and I, we like to work out. We've decided, the two of us, we're going to come up with a fitness app.
Yeah.
Right. And it has some novel approach that no one else has done. Maybe, as you work out, it tracks the calories and it does all these things, whatever it is. That's our idea. And we're going to start this startup. So the very first thing is we have the idea. We sit down, we map it out. We understand what exactly is this going to be, how are we going to make it work. We probably might need a co-founder who has the technical expertise because we don't build apps.
We just know how to run around the gym, but how to design an app.
Exactly.
Maybe. Yeah.
So there's a skill set that we need there. So we get all those people together. We now say, okay, let's build the very first prototype, right? The minimum viable product. Something that we can get into the hands of people and get them testing it immediately.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think that's usually the first stage. You build that product. Internally, you should test it using some sort of alpha testing.
Yeah.
So Tim and I would test it, go work out, see if it's working for us. Because if we're the target audience, right, it needs to work for us.
Yeah.
Then once that works and internally we have conviction, we then take that app and now test it in the market.
Yeah.
So do a sort of beta testing.
Testing, yeah, exactly.
And
select few.
Exactly. So you find some other people who are like-minded. They really are about their fitness, and this is something that they're our target audience essentially. Test it with them, and make sure that you have that product market fit, right?
Exactly.
Because you might have the right product, but your market actually doesn't need it. They might say, "Why do I need another app to do this? I already have all these other apps."
Exactly.
Or I don't really need this way in terms of what I'm doing. My fitness doesn't really need this type of app. In which case, maybe now you need to try something different, which we'll get to pivoting and failures in startups.
Yeah.
So
and you need to iterate a lot. The
exactly.
journey about a startup is that you need to keep iterating, just keep innovating, amending a little bit, because the thing is, despite perhaps having an exciting concept that is novel, that can do a lot of good things, sometimes the market may not appreciate it that way, or maybe the way it is presented to the market does not exactly consume it in that manner.
Yeah.
So you need to just keep innovating, finding ways in which you can adjust to suit the market. And there's a lot of innovation really that is going on.
Yeah.
There are a lot of disruptors, and actually a successful startup is one that perhaps will disrupt how things are done. But how people consume movies, for example, now we have Netflix.
Yeah.
Before you had
huge disruption.
Huge disruption. I remember, when I was young and I started working. I'm still young. Just so that my audience doesn't think.
Despite a few grays.
Yeah. The audience might just start thinking, this guy, how old are you? I'm still young at heart. But I remember then when on Fridays I would go to a movie guy, and I had a contact, and ask him what's new, what's fresh. Then Netflix came. And I have not checked on my guy. I don't know what he's doing now, but Netflix literally took his business away,
I know.
Yeah, so
that entire business model has been disrupted.
Exactly.
Even Hollywood, really. I mean, from the guy on the street selling you the DVDs all the way up to Hollywood executives, they're all worried about Netflix because now you can watch movies from TV shows from the comfort of your home. So it's really disrupted the movie industry. Going to the cinema.
Yeah.
That's a business that's really suffered. So being able to come in and disrupt and pivot.
Yeah.
And so similar to Netflix, right? They started out just doing, I think, movies or TV shows.
Yeah.
But then also movies. And then they said, you know what? Instead of taking other people's products and putting them on our platform, why don't we create original content and continue to innovate within that space? So just the running theme, right? Continue innovating, pivot. If you fail, you learn from it and you continue moving onwards.
Exactly.
So I think it gets back to the point of you have your minimum viable product, your MVP, you've tested it internally, you've tested it externally. Hopefully you've created that, or you found that product market fit where you have the right product for the right market. And now you say, okay, now let's go out, let's mass produce this thing. Let's get traction in the market. Let's advertise. Let's go out and do the business, run the business properly.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you go out, you do that, you grow the company now. You're now in the growth phase.
Yeah.
You start to scale the company. You say, okay, we've done this in Nairobi. Maybe we want to do this in Kampala. We want to do this in Mauritius. We want to do this in all sorts of different places.
Or similar markets. Because
exactly.
If you're doing it in Nairobi, then the concept may work in maybe countries that are almost similar characteristic with Nairobi. You could go to maybe Latin America or even try it in Southern Asia, where a similar product may be appreciated in a similar manner,
or it might not, right?
That's
which is another key issue, more insight that I think we wanted to flag is that what works in one market might not work in another.
Very true.
We see that happen quite often. We see people, again, you start something here in Nairobi, it works great here. And you say, let's go do this in
Tanzania,
a different,
or somewhere, or maybe Ethiopia.
But it doesn't work out. Yeah, I think Ethiopia is a good one. There's that example, I think, M-Pesa, right? M-Pesa, well, there's also the regulatory issue, right? So you have things like, is the regulatory climate the same? So Kenya is a bit more open in that sense. So there are many different telecommunications companies here. Ethiopia just recently opened up that market. So previously there was only the state-owned teleco. But now they've opened that up to Safaricom and other bidders, which I think Safaricom won that bid. So now Safaricom's present in Ethiopia. But I don't think mobile money has taken off as well there. Even in Uganda, every time I'm back in Kampala, at least in my personal experience, mobile money is not as widely used as it is here in Nairobi. Here, it's almost a cashless economy a lot of the time, right? You can walk around without cash a lot of the time. But so just because you're in the same region, even East Africa or the same continent, the same idea that works really well in one place may not work somewhere else. So again, that product market fit is something you really need to watch out for.
If I can recap what you've mentioned about the life cycle of a startup, it's coming up with the idea, developing the product that you want to offer to the market, building up a bit on it, developing the minimum viable product, doing the alpha and the beta testing. And of course, we have mentioned a little bit about the alpha and beta testing, then taking it to the market. Then of course, after you've taken it to the market, you become revenue positive.
That's the hope.
Yeah, exactly. So you start, and by revenue positive, of course, we mean that you get customers that use your product and they're paying for it. Okay, you're starting to make some revenue.
Yep.
And now you're starting to confirm that the product is actually it's useful to the market. The people appreciate it and they're using it. And then, of course, now you scale. Yeah,
Full
you start
scale.
to go exactly full scale. Yeah, the name of a podcast. You start to full scale. You go to you expand to new markets or reach more customers.
Yep.
And then maybe expand now to new markets with
or even deepen within the market that you already exist within, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and offer more products and add-ons.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in all this, and hopefully, in that journey, you become a unicorn or a decacorn. You grow multiple levels, really.
Yeah.
And yeah, as we're discussing about that life cycle of a startup.
Yeah.
Maybe we can perhaps have a bit of a slight deep dive on what to build up on what you mentioned, about some of the things that you need to be on the lookout for as you go through the journey, and so perhaps you can let us know what are the kind of things that you need to be on the lookout for as you go through the journey as a startup.
Sure. One thing I'll first backtrack is just to, I guess, cap on the life cycle, because a lot of people are not in the startup game for life, right? We have met some people who, for them, this is a startup that they really believe in. This company is their baby, and their plan is to be in this company forever. There are people like that.
Jobs.
Yeah, there are people who want to build this thing and stay there forever.
Exactly.
A lot of other startup founders, they want to build the business, create that astronomical value, and exit, right? So how do you exit? I mean, all of these points, really, we're going to have separate episodes on them. So we're doing a bit of a deep dive, but these are all topics in and of themselves that really deserve their own attention. So we'll get to all of these in separate episodes. But when you do get to that point where now you want to exit, there are different exit routes. You could sell to another strategic player in the market, someone else who's offering something similar and wants your business to build into theirs and create synergies and expand their business. Or you could sell to a private equity firm or someone who's looking to buy that type of business and flip it, turn it around, make it even more profitable and exit themselves. Or you could go public, which is a very it's very popular route in other jurisdictions. So in the US, Europe, Asia, going public is a huge deal. You IPO, you have that initial public offering where you basically now offer shares in your ownership in your company to the general public, and people can buy on the stock exchange, or even here in Nairobi, we have companies that are public on the Nairobi Securities Exchange.
Jump down that point on going public. What exactly does it mean when we say going public?
So startups, generally, what we've been talking about are privately owned companies, right? I mean, they're usually companies. We'll also talk about the structure and all of that, but usually it's a privately owned company, in that Tim and I have started our fitness app and we're the two shareholders. Down the line, we might look for funding, and that's another whole part in the life cycle, though it runs the gamut. That can happen at any point. Could happen really early on. It could happen later on in the life of the company, depending on how much money you have. But you get your funding from now external investors, and they also get ownership in your company. So maybe we've sold 15, 10, 20% of the company, and we still own 80%. So it's still privately owned, just that it's us two and a few other people. But then eventually, as you grow and you have this, amazing value, you can raise even more money to continue to grow this by going public, which is now, you say, instead of seeking private equity, giving private ownership of the company, you give public ownership of the company.
You invite the public now through by listing,
exactly,
using your shareholding,
exactly,
to the members of public to subscribe to shares through
precisely
through the Securities Exchange.
You list, and it's a huge deal. In many places, New York Stock Exchange, they'll ring a bell the first day that you're listed on the stock exchange, and then now you're listed. People can go publicly search and find information. There's a lot that comes with being publicly listed. There's a lot of regulatory oversight and disclosure that you need to do, but it's a huge milestone, and in many ways, it's usually a huge success.
Yeah.
Though, of course, there are also many
Of course.
failures that
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
at the IPO stage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
just getting back to sort of some of the insights I think that we can share when it comes to startups and that journey. I think for me, one of the biggest ones is the importance of failure. I think that's something that's so key because so many startups fail. Most likely, if you're watching this and you're starting a startup, most likely that startup is going to fail. That's, I mean, just statistically speaking.
Yeah,
not to dissuade you.
Let's give the numbers. Yeah. So statistically, you know, and a lot of research has been done. The success rates of startups is between 10 to 20%, and closer to the 20% success rates of every startup. And there are good reasons for it.
Yeah.
You know, we could mention just a few. Some of the reasons really include the fact that some of them might be a timing factor. So Tesla
right
now,
idea, wrong
you
time.
know, electric cars are now a very good area to invest in. You know, if you had come up with a very exciting idea in 1970, where everybody wants to smell diesel on their car, and you're doing electric cars, then the concept might be exciting, but the market appreciation of it may not be that good. Similarly, you may not, despite having a novel idea, if you do not do your testing very well, develop the minimum viable product properly, then when you go to the market, when you're marketing that product, the market may not exactly, you know, appreciate it. Some of the reasons could be like funding reasons. You know, getting funding, because like startups need a lot of funding to scale. You know, you have a wonderful idea, you need even a lot of funding when you're developing your concept. So those are some of the reasons why startups may fail. And the thing is, you as a founder, you need to be you know, you need to be a little, I mean, to be aware of what to expect. It requires a bit of grit. Sometimes when you're building a concept that other people are finding is new, you know, sometimes the reception may not be that good. But if you're fighting through, sometimes, you know, you might get just that one break that goes with you to levels that you never thought you could reach.
Right. And that's always the goal, right? The goal is to get there.
Exactly. Yeah. That's always the goal. Yeah. So I think there's something we had started on.
I started on a very not optimistic note, which is that most often startups fail.
And when they succeed, they go really big.
So if you succeed, it's going to work out really well. But a lot of the times there are failures, especially early on, right? If you're coming up with something new, a lot of the times the market won't understand it, right? I see a lot of times people say, if I come up with an idea for a startup that's really good, and I tell it like 10 people, and all 10 of them say, yes, this is the right idea, do this. A lot of the times, that's not a good idea, because if everyone already sees it, if everybody already understands it.
If everybody understands it very well, then perhaps it's not groundbreaking.
Perhaps, right? So those ideas where people don't understand it until you go out and do it. So again, the idea of Uber, right? And this is things I used to sort of see other podcasts, see people talking about business ideas that came up back when someone first said, I'll get my car and I'll drive around and pick people up and take them wherever. But they'll be on this app and they'll call me on the app and then I'll show up. People didn't understand that concept. It's a lot of or Airbnb. Right? I'm going to open up my house and people are just going to go there. It's like, how do you know who's living in your house? What if they wreck it? All of this. But it's testing those ideas out and going and figuring out what works. But I think there's so much value in going out and just doing it and failing. Because it's inevitable that at some point something will go wrong. I don't know of any business that's ever been 100% success rate right from the beginning all the way up until the end. For example, Slack. Slack is a very popular business messaging app. So internally you could use like Teams or something like that. But Slack is a very popular one, especially in tech circles. So, you know, you message people internally just to know what's going on and keep people updated. It's very popular now, worth a lot of money. Slack started out internally actually as an internal communications tool at a gaming company. So it was a gaming company. Their whole focus was to make a video game, but the video game failed. And what they decided was, you know what, we failed in this one way, but in the process, we actually learned that this internal communications tool is really nifty and really cool, and people might find a lot of value in it. So that's when they now built Slack out of that. So finding things like that, that even within failure, you find the things that work and pivot. So I think pivoting is really important. Finding the things that are working and moving towards that. What's the things that are making you money? What are the things that your customers are actually excited about? There's something there, right? That there's where there's smoke, there's usually fire. So that's where you should sort of be pointing your focus and adapting for as you continue to move through the startup cycle. And one thing I wanted to have you touch on, perhaps in terms of these insights and things to be thinking about as you're starting your startup journey. What's the importance of the founding team? And so you're found, if you're the founder, okay, or if you have a co-founder, how important is it to know who to pick or who to start this journey with? I mean, if you're gonna be in this car ride together from here all the way to, you know, some really far destination, you best know who you're in the car with, right? So how does that frame your journey as a startup and what you can expect, funding, and all the difficulties and, you know, failures and the successes that are to come?
Yeah. Actually, the thing about founders is they're really the brainchild behind this startup. These are the guys who understand exactly what they're trying to accomplish. And first of all, it's very difficult to be a singular founder. And you can be, not that it's impossible. You can be, but I think there's data that shows that a lot of times investors will have a challenge investing in a single founder. You know, maybe there's a bit of you don't trust that if this person is sick, maybe whether they will keep the company going, you know, or maybe they could wake up one day and they're like, you know what, I'm so done, and I'm moving on to something else. But there's a bit of faith that is placed when you have more than one founder, because when you have many, that then it's not working, because it becomes a lot harder to move as quick. But the thing is, the benefit perhaps is, number one, you would be supporting each other, providing synergy. You know, like I mentioned earlier, I may be good at understanding what I want to achieve, but I can't design anything. You know, I'm not good at designing, or I may not be good at engineering stuff. I might be actually very good at understanding what I want to do and developing the product, but I can't sell it. You know, I may have challenges. So you get people who you have synergies with each other, and to help you with the journey of developing in the startup. And then, of course, the financing for startups. And that's, again, let our audience know that we will have another episode on financing for startups. You know, how the funding for startup goes. At the earlier stages, sometimes it gets heavily dependent on the founder. First of all, because it's usually risky business, investing at the early stages. And if you have you have confidence in the founder, despite not really understanding what they're trying to do, you may understand it just enough, or even their passion. You know, the moment they're describing it, you know, sometimes you can listen to them. But a lot of funding for startups in the early stages is tied around the founders.
Yeah.
Because some of the funding, such as funding from family and friends, you basically get that funding because your family, you know, no questions asked. You know, you go talk to your cousin,
like Dom
your
Toretto.
uncle, you tell them that, or your parents, and you tell them, I have this idea, please help me see it through, and they'll fund you because your family, you know, that's what family does to each other. It might be very crazy, and they're like, you know, let's just give him some faith in him. Same thing with friends. You know, friends is a relationship thing. You know, you go to your friends, you know, they might be thinking, oh, that idea is kind of crazy, but I think Adrian is a cool guy. You know, he can be, you know, thinking his own things. It may not, you know,
may not be alone.
He may be not alone, really. But the thing is that idea is easy to fund. And then again, when you go now to when you start getting third-party investing, like venture capital investing, there is a consideration to the founders. For example, let's go back to that fitness app thing.
Yeah.
So assuming
I feel like after this, we now have to build a fitness app.
We might build one, actually. Yeah, we might build one.
Anyway,
so let's go back to that example of a fitness app. So you and I, for example, say we're setting up a fitness app. first of all, we show up pitching looking very unfit. Okay. We don't look like we have ever set our foot in the gym, or the last time we did a fitness thing was so long ago.
Yeah.
And then not only that, we look so unfit. Not only that, none of us has skills in building anything.
Yeah.
That of course will bring a challenge in convincing convincing guys to fund your idea, because number one, the question is, do these guys truly even understand what they're doing?
What's their track record?
Yeah, what's their track record? So that's, maybe you have a brilliant idea. It may require you to think through what kind of co-founders you're going to bring in, because it helps with your journey. It could help with your journey. If you have a co-founder perhaps who may help the journey in terms of fundraising, that's good. That's good for you. If you have one that can help you create. So if we both of us and we don't look fit, but then one of us, we get a co-founder who is so toned, guys may start listening to us. Okay, they look like this guy will tell them a few things. So that is that's something that of course startups may need to, and founders of course may need to be aware of, and what investors may, because an investor, despite the fact that investing in startup business, everybody who is innate, especially at the very early stages before these companies scale up a bit, it's like it's risky, but you also don't want to take blind risks.
Yeah,
it's risky, but you want to be able to say, after considering XYZ, I feel like I'm confident to put money in this.
Yeah,
and that of course ties a lot around the founders.
Correct. And having conviction in them. I mean,
exactly.
It's a cliche, but it's a lot of times people invest in the people, right? They're investing in you.
True that. Yeah.
And the conviction they have in you and what you're able to do, not necessarily in what it is that you've decided to do.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
I think that sort of wraps up the insights that I think we wanted to deliver today. But of course, it's an ongoing conversation. It's something that we're going to keep coming back to in future episodes. So, but now I think I just wanted to move into wisdom from the course. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and actually we should get some insights from you. So like we mentioned, we will always be having a slot where we have wisdom from the course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us, Adrian. So what wisdom have you received from the course?
As you know, we played last week.
Yes, we did actually
at Windsor.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Pretty fun time
for you. Yeah.
Okay, we won't talk about scores.
But yeah.
We won't talk about scores. I don't think either of us played our handicap or close to that, but it was a pretty fun game. For me, especially, it was much better than the last time I played. The last time I played, I decided I need to take a break from this game. Mentally, it's frustrating me and all of this.
It's like a startup journey.
Right? But, in the failures, you learn and you pivot. And so what I want to talk about this week is focus and mindfulness. Those are two things that I think the game of golf really, really shows you the value of. So focus in the sense that the game of golf does not allow for any distractions.
True.
I've found you cannot be distracted at any point when you're playing. I mean, even when you're not the one playing, I think it's good to stay zoned in, especially like when when you get to the greens and people are putting, it's good to see how everyone else is putting and how the greens are running, how it's breaking. Understanding what's going on, I think, is good. But most especially when you are going to take your shot, it's a moment of breathing, being present, focusing on this one thing, and making sure that this shot is the most important thing in the world to you at this very moment. Nothing else matters. If you start thinking about the hazard on your right and the water on your left and the people who are watching you and anything other than what's happening right here, you're not gonna make the ideal shot. You're not going to hit it as well as you want it to, which for me reflects a lot in life, right? If you're focused, most of the times the things that you focus on and give 100% extra focus, those are the things that get done, and those are the things that get done well. I'm terrible at multitasking. I'll try to do something while my wife is talking to me, and I'm also doing something else. Something's suffering. A lot of the time, it's what she's trying to tell me.
That's what suffers.
Focus. Trying to have that laser focus and focusing on that one thing, I think, is so key. And the game of golf reveals that to me every time I play. Even before I hit the shot, and I know I was thinking about something else, I might as well not even hit it because I know it's going to mess up. And then the mindfulness in the sense that taking time to just sit with your thoughts and be present again, and just understand how it is that you're feeling, what it is that's going through your mind, without judging yourself, without being harsh, but just accepting what it is. What are your emotions? What is your physical state at that moment? Just being there and understanding that, I think, is such a key thing, and something that I don't do enough. But the game of golf, again, reminds me to do that. When I get to the golf course, I try as much as possible to block out anything that's not at the course. I try to be present with the people I'm playing with nature. You know, it's so cool to be at a golf course and just see all the. So there's usually animals there,
Yeah.
there's water, there's
Yeah.
all sorts of things going on. So I really like to be present and mindful of where I am, the privilege that I have, and also just being in that moment, which I think a lot of the times we're always thinking about everything else, what's coming next, what did we do before, that we forget where we are in life. So I think that grounds me a lot, and it's something that I get a lot from the game of golf, and I think something that I'm also trying to replicate in my day-to-day life. I'm trying to take time, maybe go out into nature, right? Go walk in
Yeah.
Karura Forest, Ngong Hills,
Yeah.
wherever it is that you find that peace of mind, or even in your own home, and just be present and mindful, and just take the time to, you know, meditate and think about what's going on in your life at that moment, and block everything else out. So that's the wisdom I got from the course this past week.
Wow,
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah, that's great wisdom, and I think even it can apply in what you're doing, you know, especially if you're running a startup. And
Yeah.
actually, when I say especially if you're running a startup, like, you know, I founded a law firm, beginning of this year, and it is like really a startup journey, and I'm also learning as I'm even discussing, you know, how startups grow and how they develop, and it's even lessons that I'm taking in as well.
Yeah.
And scaling up, you know.
Right? But you don't
Hopefully-
call yourself a founder.
Of course, I'm not a founder. I'm a founding partner,
Yeah.
you know, but I'm not a founder because unless, of course, which will be coming, unless I'm offering the legal services in a very
Novel way, right?
novel way.
That's scalable.
That's scalable, you know,
Yeah.
that's scalable in multiple countries,
Yeah.
locations. At which point I will be a legal entrepreneur or a founder in the legal space,
Yeah.
and not a lawyer, because law is very national
Yeah.
in terms of how you practice. You get a license for
Mhm.
a particular jurisdiction. So I can say that it's working so well here. I might as well go to Sri Lanka and and just practice it. And it's true, the thing about focus,
Mm.
you know, trying to be keeping focus, just like that lesson you know, from the course, trying to be dialed in, avoiding distractions, especially because there are many for
Yeah.
a startup, you know, just staying dialed in. On top of that, maybe you can let us know, you know, what is something interesting that you have learned this week.
So,
Yeah.
my interesting fact for the week.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to make sure I get his name right. The interesting thing I learned this week was I learned of a gentleman named, his name is Basiru Diomaye Faye. He's a 44-year-old man, former tax inspector in Senegal.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, he
yeah.
was in prison.
Oh, yeah.
2 weeks ago, imagine 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, we were, I don't know, filming the first episode. 2 weeks ago, this guy was in prison on what I understand were political charges: contempt of court, defaming magistrates. I don't know what he said or did, but he was in jail. He was in prison for that. He's, I guess, like second in command in the opposition party in the sort of the prominent opposition party in Senegal. The number one, the leader of the opposition party, he was also in prison. I think they were both released. There was some sort of amnesty that was granted, but the leader of the party was barred from ever running for election. So he tapped this number two guy, Mr. Faye, who he was elected essentially as the president of Senegal.
Exactly.
He's now, or when he takes office, he will be the youngest sitting or democratically elected head of state on the continent, which I think is just really remarkable.
Big, yeah.
Yeah, at 44 years old, so that's like 10 years from now. Right? What would
You
we
say
be doing?
elected.
Yes.
Because I'm sure there have been other younger leaders, but I suspect some of them through coups.
So,
Yeah, a lot of coups have happened in Africa.
democratically elected head
okay.
of state.
Yeah,
He's going to be
yeah.
the youngest.
Yeah.
The former president had tried to delay the elections. There was a whole sort of uproar about this, but just the fact that someone so young has taken office in another, young democracy. I don't think they've ever had a coup in Senegal. So I think it also speaks to, I guess, the strength of their democracy and sort of fighting for constitutional rights. I think it's just a remarkable story just to hear about this guy 2 weeks ago in prison. Now he's the head of state. His policies, I mean, I'm not Senegalese. I'm not familiar with sort of his politics. And I do know that he's
it's just a story that we are not endorsing his politics, guys. We do not know his politics.
We should go back to our disclaimer. But I think it's just seeing younger people coming into office in what is already a very young continent. I think that's really where I think things are moving. And just seeing this as being hopefully one of many or the start of this type of journey, I think is really cool and really refreshing to see. So hopefully he comes in with new perspectives, new ideas. There's a huge youth unemployment issue in Senegal, as there is in many places across the continent. So I look forward to seeing how he'll tackle that and how his administration will work through that. But hopefully it works out. Let's see what, only time will tell. But that was my interesting fact for the week.
Wow.
Yeah. Wonderful. What about you? What did you learn this week?
I read an article by a professor in, Harvard Business School. And he was exploring the reasons why startups fail.
Ooh, okay. Very on point.
Exactly. He was exploring the reasons why startups fail. And, I had read and I had seen a couple of other reasons brought up, like lack of funding. We already mentioned.
Yeah.
But his first point was that the reason why some startups fail is lack of passion and grit. When founders lack passion and grit. And I thought that was interesting because you get all manner of reasons that hardly go to the founders' staying power, that hardly goes to the founders' staying power. And I thought that was quite interesting because it is actually true. Because if you don't, stay in to see it through, you may never know what you could have unlocked. Wow. If you don't have staying power, you may not understand. And that perhaps even was very interesting for me because I did not expect that to be the number, of course, for in his case, to be the number one reason that goes into, the fact that you will choose to stay in, even when sometimes it looks like, it may not be exciting or, and you have that grit to keep fighting. So that was an interesting, something that I learned for myself this week, and I think it even goes past me. Go to the personality, the makeup of the founder, and sometimes we don't like to place a lot of emphasis on the makeup of the founder, which actually may contribute a lot to the chances of success.
Wow.
Of the particular.
That's really cool. And I think it hits on so many of the things that we've talked about, right? The importance of the founders, the importance of failure, sticking it through. So even if many startups fail, getting through that failure and having that grit to go forward. And it reminds me of the famous is it now an African proverb? Tough time never lasts.
Only the tough do.
Only tough people last.
I don't know whether it's even an African proverb, really, but I've heard a lot about it. I don't even know why.
It's a meme at this point. There's a guy. I'll send you the meme.
Please do. Yeah, you're laughing. Must be very funny.
It's hilarious. If you know, you know.
If you know, you know. Okay. Yeah. So today we have discussed basically what's a startup. We have looked at the key identifiers of a startup. We've looked at what distinguishes a startup from any other entrepreneurial venture, because not all entrepreneurial ventures are startups,
and not all entrepreneurs are founders.
And not all entrepreneurs are founders. Exactly, you can be an entrepreneur but not necessarily a founder. We've looked at the life cycle of a startup. How it progresses from founding. Coming up with the idea, maybe getting a co-founder, moving through the MVP and the scaling process. We've equally looked at some of the challenges that people may have to be aware of, when going through the startup journey, including things like regulatory concerns, finding a fit for a particular market. We've also looked at founders, why it is important, why founders are important, and how that can inspire the journey. Some good wisdom from the course. It's a good one. And of course our lessons, things that we've learned in this week. So yeah, thank you so much, audience, for tuning in. I hope you've benefited from this episode. There'll be more coming your way, and we look forward to just hearing from you once you've engaged with our content. Please let us know what you think, whether you found our content useful, or even topics that you would want us to address, or let us know your feedback. So please be on the lookout for this episode. Please follow us on all the streaming platforms. Like and subscribe on YouTube, and we look forward to engaging some more. Until next time, goodbye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.